At the family reunion, my daughter stood alone by the dessert table, watching the other kids practice their dance routine. My cousin Jasper looked at her and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Good thing Maya's not performing. She'd just embarrass herself anyway." My Aunt Patricia didn't even glance up from her phone when she added, "Some children just aren't meant for the spotlight." I watched my 8-year-old's face crumble, her small hands trembling as she gripped her paper. Plate and something inside me shattered. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My name is Sophia, and until that moment at our annual family reunion, I thought I had learned to shield my daughter from the poison that ran through my family's veins. I was wrong. The cruelty I had endured for years had found a new target, and watching them aim it at Maya was worse than anything they had ever done to me. 3 months earlier, we had moved back to our hometown of Cedar Falls, a small city nestled in the mountains of Colorado. After my divorce, I needed a fresh start. Somewhere Maya could grow up with stability, maybe even family nearby. I had spent 5 years in Chicago, building a life that looked successful on paper but felt hollow inside. My ex-husband, a corporate lawyer, had affairs that everyone knew about but no one mentioned. When I finally filed for divorce, my family called me dramatic. When I got full custody of Maya, they said I was selfish for taking her from her father. The thing about my family is that they've always had a script for how life should go. My older brother, Marcus, followed it perfectly. Medical school, prestigious residency, head of cardiology at 35. My sister, Delilah, played her part. 2. Married her college sweetheart, had 3 beautiful children, ran a successful interior design business from her mansion in Boulder. And then there was me, the art teacher who married wrong, divorced messily, and raised a shy daughter who preferred books to beauty pageants. Maya had always been different. While her cousins took ballet and competed in pageants, she wrote stories. In notebooks and practiced magic tricks she learned from YouTube videos. She could solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute, and knew the names of every constellation visible from our apartment balcony. But at family gatherings, these talents were invisible. What mattered was how well you could perform their version of success. The reunion was held at my parents' estate in the foothills, a sprawling property with gardens and a pool that had hosted these gatherings for 20 years. When the invitation came, I hesitated. Maya had been taking dance classes for the past 6 months, inspired by a teacher who saw her potential and encouraged her to explore movement as storytelling. She wasn't like her cousins, who had been in competitive dance since they could walk. She danced with joy, not precision. She moved like she was painting with her body, creating pictures only she could see. "Mom, can I perform at the reunion?" She had asked me 3 weeks before, her eyes bright with hope. "Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm ready. She says my interpretation of the storm is the most beautiful thing she's ever seen." I should have said no. I should have protected her from the inevitable judgment. But the hope in her eyes, the pride in her voice when she talked about her dance, made me weak. I thought maybe, just maybe, if they saw her passion, they'd see her the way I did. They'd understand that talent comes in different forms, that beauty isn't just about perfect turnouts and pointed toes. "We'll see," I had said, which Maya correctly interpreted as yes. She practiced every day after school, turning our small living room into her stage. She'd move the coffee table against the wall, lay out her makeshift dance floor, and lose herself in the music. Her dance told the story of a storm building, breaking and passing, leaving peace in its wake. She had choreographed it herself, choosing movements that felt true to her rather than technically perfect. Watching her was like watching someone discover they could fly. I made her a costume from materials we found at the craft store, flowing gray fabric that moved like clouds, silver ribbons that caught the light like lightning. She helped me sew on hundreds of tiny sequins that sparkled like rain. The night before the reunion, she tried it on and spun in front of the mirror, gasping at how the fabric floated around her. "Do you think they'll like it?" she asked, suddenly, uncertain. "You're not dancing for them," I reminded her. "You're dancing because it makes you happy." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Part of her wanted their approval, wanted to belong in a way I had never managed. She had heard the comments over the years, absorbed the subtle dismissals. This performance was her chance to prove she was worthy of their attention. The morning of the reunion, I woke up with dread sitting heavy in my stomach. Maya was already awake, practicing her routine in her pajamas, humming the music under her breath. She had the kind of focus that turned the rest of the world into background noise. I made her favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with extra syrup, and tried to match her excitement. "Remember," I said as we drove through the winding mountain roads, "no matter what happens, I'm proud of you." "I know, Mom," she said, but her fingers were drumming nervously against her leg. We arrived to find the party already in full swing. The younger cousins were in the pool, while the teenagers clustered around the outdoor speakers, practicing a group dance they'd been working on for months. It was the kind of synchronized, technically perfect routine that won competitions. All sharp movements and identical smiles. Maya watched them with a mixture of awe and anxiety. "They're really good," she whispered. "They're different," I corrected. "Not better." My mother greeted us at the garden gate, her smile tight. "Sophia, darling, and Maya." She looked at the garment bag I was carrying. "What's that?" "Maya's costume," I said. "She's prepared something for the talent portion." My mother's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh? I didn't realize she was performing. The program is already set." "I mentioned it in my RSVP," I lied smoothly. "There must have been a miscommunication." "Well, we'll see if there's time," she said, which I knew meant there wouldn't be. The next hour was a careful dance of avoidance. I mingled with relatives who asked pointed questions about my situation and when I planned to get back on my feet. Maya tried to join her cousins but was met with polite indifference. They were busy perfecting their routine, and she didn't know the steps. She ended up sitting alone on a garden bench, watching them practice with her hands folded in her lap. That's when I heard Jasper's comment about embarrassment. He was standing, with a group of adults, drinking beer and watching the kids practice. Patricia was beside him, along with several other relatives. They weren't even trying to lower their voices. "Remember last Christmas?" Patricia continued. "When she tried to show everyone that card trick. Poor thing didn't realize nobody was interested." "She's sweet," my Aunt Linda added with false sympathy. "Just different. Not everyone can be a performer." I felt my hands clench into fists. Maya had heard every word. I could see it in the way her shoulders hunched, the way she seemed to shrink into herself. She stood up slowly, walked to the dessert table, and pretended to be interested in the cookie selection. But I saw her hands shaking. I saw her bite her lip the way she did when she was trying not to cry. I started walking toward her, ready to scoop her up and leave, ready to protect her the way I should have from the beginning. But then my brother Marcus intercepted me. "Sophia, there you are. Mom wants to know if you can help with the food." "In a minute," I said, trying to step around him. "She needs you now. The caterers are confused about something." I looked back at Maya. She had put down her plate and was walking toward the house, probably to find a bathroom where she could cry in private. My heart broke a little more. "Fine," I said to Marcus, "but this conversation isn't over." The catering issue was nothing, a question about whether the vegetarian options should go on a separate table. By the time I got back outside, the talent show had started. The cousins were performing their group routine, all matching outfits and perfect synchronization. The adults clapped and cheered, phones out to record every moment. Maya was nowhere to be seen. I found her in my childhood bedroom, sitting on the window seat with her costume bag beside her. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were red. "Hey, baby," I said, sitting beside her. "I don't want to perform anymore," she said quietly. "You don't have to. We can leave right now if you want." She shook her head. "Everyone will think I'm scared." "So what if they do?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, with eyes older than her 8 years. "Do you ever get tired of them thinking you're not good enough?" The question knocked the wind out of me. I pulled her close, smelling her strawberry shampoo, feeling her small body relax against mine. "All the time," I admitted. "But you know what? Their opinion doesn't change who we are." "But what if they're right? What if I'm not good enough?" "Good enough for what? For them?" "Maya, you're already more than good enough. You're extraordinary. You see the world in colors they can't even imagine. You create beauty they're too blind to recognize. That's not your failing. It's theirs." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I still want to dance." "Then dance. But not for them. For me." I kissed the top of her head. "That's my girl." We stayed there a while longer, listening to the sounds of the party below. The group routine must have ended, because I could hear individual performances starting. Someone was playing violin. Someone else was singing. Normal reunion talents, the kind that fit neatly into acceptable boxes. "Mom?" Maya said eventually. "Will you help me get ready?" I helped her into her costume, watching the transformation happen. As soon as the fabric settled around her, she stood differently. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled, a real smile this time. "You're beautiful," I told her. "I feel like a storm cloud," she said, spinning so the fabric billowed. "The most beautiful storm cloud I've ever seen." We walked back downstairs, together, her small hand in mine. The talent show was winding down. Perfect timing, really. The audience would be tired, less critical. Maybe some would have already wandered off to refill their drinks or check on their younger children. But I didn't care about the audience anymore. I cared about Maya, about the courage it took for her to put on that costume after hearing those cruel words. I cared about the way she held her head high as we walked through the garden, past the very people who had dismissed her. "Excuse me." I called out to my mother, who was managing the program. "Maya would like to perform." My mother looked flustered. "Oh, Sophia, I don't think—" "She's prepared something special," I interrupted. "It'll only take 5 minutes." Before she could protest further, I walked to the makeshift stage area and connected my phone to the speakers. The relatives who were still paying attention looked confused. Some whispered to each other. I saw Jasper smirk and nudge Patricia. Maya stood at the edge of the performance space, waiting. I caught her eye and nodded. She took a deep breath, stepped into position, and closed her eyes. The music began. Not the pop songs her cousins had danced to, but something deeper, more complex. The opening notes of Storm by Ludovico Einaudi filled the garden. Maya stood perfectly still for the first few measures, feeling the music, letting it fill her. Then she began to move. She didn't dance like her cousins. There were no perfect turns, no competition-ready leaps, no synchronized arm movements that had been drilled for months. Maya danced like the storm she was portraying, wild, unpredictable, beautiful in its rawness. Her arms swept through the air like wind through trees. Her body curved and straightened like lightning splitting the sky. The gray fabric of her costume moved around her like actual clouds, the sequins catching the late afternoon sun and throwing tiny sparkles across the garden. I heard someone whisper, "What is she doing?" But I didn't look away from my daughter. I watched her tell her story through movement, watched her become the storm. The music built, and she built with it, her movements growing stronger, more confident. She wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. She was just dancing, the way she did in our living room when she thought no one was watching. Then something shifted in the garden. The whispers stopped. The smirks faded. People began to actually watch, really watch, as this 8-year-old girl transformed into something elemental. She spun, and the fabric created a perfect circle around her. She reached toward the sky, and for a moment, it seemed like she might actually touch the clouds. She fell to her knees and rolled across the ground, becoming rain, becoming the earth accepting the storm's gift. My sister Delilah, who had been scrolling through her phone, looked up. Her expression changed from boredom to surprise to something I'd never seen before. Wonder, maybe. Marcus stopped mid-conversation with our uncle. Even the teenage cousins, too cool to care about anything, turned to watch. The music reached its crescendo, and Maya threw herself into the air. Not a technical leap, not something any dance teacher would put in a recital, but it was perfect. She hung there for a moment, suspended between earth and sky, her costume billowing around her like wings. When she landed, she crumpled to the ground, becoming the calm after the storm, the exhausted peace that follows nature's fury. The last notes faded. Maya lay still on the ground, breathing hard, lost in the world she had created. For several seconds, nobody moved. The garden was silent, except for the distant sound of wind chimes and the splash of someone in the pool who hadn't noticed the performance. Then, from somewhere in the back, slow clapping started. I turned to see Mrs. Chen, our elderly neighbor who rarely spoke at these gatherings, standing with tears in her eyes. "Beautiful," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Absolutely. Beautiful." Others began to clap, tentatively at first, then with more enthusiasm. Maya sat up, blinking like she was waking from a dream. She looked around at the faces watching her, some confused, some moved, some reassessing everything they thought they knew about my quiet daughter. Patricia was the first of the earlier critics to speak. "That was unexpected," she said carefully. "That was art," Mrs. Chen corrected firmly. "Real art, not performance, not competition. Art." Maya stood up slowly, brushing grass from her costume. She looked for me, and I gave her a thumbs up, my eyes wet with tears I wasn't trying to hide. She smiled, that small secret smile she saved for moments when she knew she'd done something special. "Where did she learn to dance like that?" my Aunt Linda asked me. "She didn't learn it," I said. "She felt it." The gathering continued, but something had changed. Maya didn't suddenly become the center of attention. That wasn't her way, and it wasn't what she wanted. But the exclusion stopped. When the cousins went back to practicing their routine, one of them, Arya, asked Maya if she wanted to join them. "I don't know your dance," Maya said. "That's okay," Arya replied. "Maybe you can teach us yours?" I watched them from across the garden, Maya showing Arya how to move like wind, how to let the music guide your body instead of forcing your body to match the music. Other cousins joined in, curious about this different way of dancing. They weren't very good at it, too trained in technical precision to let go completely, but they were trying. Jasper found me by the drinks table. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You owe Maya an apology," I corrected. "You're right. That was... I didn't know she could do that." "There's a lot you don't know about her, about both of us." He nodded, looking genuinely ashamed. "We get caught up in our own definitions of success, you know. Competition results, medals, traditional achievements. We forget there are other ways to be talented." I wanted to stay angry, but I recognized the attempt at understanding. "Maya doesn't dance to win," I said. "She dances to express something words can't capture. That's the difference." My mother approached me later, while Maya was teaching a group of younger cousins how to dance like rain. She watched them for a moment, her expression softer than I'd seen it in years. I didn't put her on the program because I didn't want her to be embarrassed, she admitted quietly. I thought. Well, I thought she'd try to do what the others do and fall short. She did something better, I said. She did something honest. Yes, my mother agreed. She did. The afternoon wore on, but the atmosphere had shifted. People approached Maya differently now, with curiosity instead of condescension. They asked her about her dance, about what inspired it, about how she created the movements. She answered in her quiet way, sometimes demonstrating a gesture or explaining how rain feels different from wind when you're trying to become it. Marcus found us as we were packing up to leave. That was brave, he said to Maya. Dancing your own dance when everyone else is doing something different. That takes courage. Maya looked up at him, considering. It's scarier to dance someone else's dance, she said, because then you're pretending to be someone you're not. Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, watching my successful doctor. Brother processed this wisdom from an 8-year-old. In the car on the way home, Maya was quiet. Not sad quiet, but thoughtful quiet. Finally, she said, Mom, I don't think I want to perform at reunions anymore. My heart sank a little. Did something happen? Did someone say something? No, she said quickly. Everyone was nice after. But I realized something. When I dance for them, I'm trying to make them see me. But when I dance for me, I don't care if they see me or not. And that feels better. I pulled over to the side of the road and turned to look at her. When did you get so wise? She grinned. Mrs. Rodriguez says artists understand. Things other people take longer to learn. Mrs. Rodriguez is right. Can we stop for ice cream? Absolutely. We sat in the ice cream shop, her with chocolate chip cookie dough, me with mint chocolate chip, and talked about everything except the reunion. She told me about a new story she was writing, about a girl who could talk to stars. I told her about an art project I was planning for my students, a mural about finding beauty in unexpected places. Like my dance, she said. Exactly, like your dance. When we got home, she carefully hung up her costume in her closet. I want to keep it forever, she said, even when it doesn't fit anymore. We'll frame it, I promised. Put it on your wall like art. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked, Do you think they really understood? Or were they just being polite? I think some of them understood, I said honestly. Others might need more time. Change doesn't happen all at once. That's okay, she said. I'm not dancing for them anyway. No, I agreed. You're not. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the emotional day. I sat on the edge of her bed for a while, watching her breathe, thinking about courage and art and the different ways we find to belong or choose not to belong. My phone buzzed with texts from various family members. Delilah had sent a video of Maya's dance, asking if she could share it with a friend who ran a contemporary dance program. Marcus wanted to know if Maya might be interested in performing at his hospital's children's charity event. But only if she wants to, and only her kind of dancing. Even Patricia had messaged a simple, I was wrong. She's special. But the message that mattered most came from Maya's dance teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. Apparently, Aria had called her, excited about learning a new way to dance, wanting to know if she could take classes that taught storm dancing. You've started something, Mrs. Rodriguez wrote. The kids want to learn to dance with their hearts, not just their heads. Would Maya be interested in helping me teach a workshop? She could show them what she showed today. That dance isn't about perfect technique, but perfect expression. I smiled, already knowing what Maya would say. She'd probably agree, but only if she could teach it her way, without mirrors, without counts, without the traditional structure that turned dance into competition rather than art. The next morning, Maya was up early, dancing in the living room. But this time was different. She wasn't practicing for anyone or preparing for anything. She was just moving, just being, just expressing whatever was inside her that needed to come out. I watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, and realized this was the real victory. Not that she had changed their minds or earned their approval, but that she had kept herself intact in the process. "Mom, dance with me," she called, noticing me watching. "I don't know how to dance like you do." "That's okay. Dance like you do." So I put down my coffee and joined her in the living room, moving awkwardly at first, then finding my own rhythm. We danced like rain and wind and storms and sunshine. We danced like ourselves, finally free from the weight of other people's expectations. Later that day, I posted the video Delilah had sent me with a simple caption. "My daughter danced her truth yesterday. She reminded me that authenticity is always more beautiful than perfection." The comments poured in, from family members who had been there and strangers who hadn't. But the one that made me cry came from my grandfather's sister, who lived in Florida and couldn't make the reunion. "Your grandmother would have loved this," she wrote. "She always said the family had forgotten how to see beauty in different forms. Maya reminds me of her, someone who refused to shrink herself to fit into spaces too small for her spirit." I showed the comment to Maya, who read it carefully. "I wish I had met great-grandma," she said. "I think you two would have understood each other perfectly." That evening, as we prepared dinner together, Maya said, "I've been thinking about the reunion." "What about it?" "Everyone tried so hard to be perfect. The cousins with their dance, Aunt Delilah with her stories about her perfect house, Uncle Marcus talking about his important job. They were all performing too, just differently than me." I stopped chopping vegetables, struck by her insight. "You're right. We all perform in our own ways. But the difference is," she continued, measuring rice carefully, "they perform to hide who they are. I performed to show who I am. And that, my love, is why your performance changed everything." She smiled, satisfied with this conclusion, and went back to cooking. But I stood there, knife in hand, marveling at this child who saw the world so clearly. The reunion had been about more than just her dance. It had been about all of us, our need for approval, our fear of judgment, our desperate attempts to belong by being anything other than ourselves. Maya had broken that pattern, not through confrontation or argument, but through the simple act of being herself completely. In 3 minutes of dance, she had shown us all another way to exist in the world, not as performers seeking approval, but as artists sharing our truth. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had excluded her for being different, and she had responded by showing them just how beautiful different could be. She hadn't conformed to their expectations. She had created new ones. She hadn't asked for permission to belong. She had simply belonged to herself so completely that the question became irrelevant. That night, as I wrote in my journal, I tried to capture what had really happened at that reunion. It wasn't just that Maya had changed their minds through her performance. It was that she had demonstrated a different kind of courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to be authentic, to risk rejection in service of truth. She had also taught me something. For years, I had absorbed my family's judgment, internalized. Their criticism made myself smaller to avoid their dismissal. But Maya had shown me another way. Instead of fighting their narrow definitions of success, she had simply offered her own definition. Instead of arguing about her worth, she had demonstrated it. There would be other reunions, other gatherings, other moments when the old patterns might resurface. But something fundamental had shifted. Maya had claimed her space not by demanding it, but by filling it so completely with her authentic self that denying it became impossible. The next weekend, she performed her storm dance for Mrs. Rodriguez's other students. Some of them tried to copy her exactly, missing the point. But a few understood. They closed their eyes, felt the music, and found their own storms to dance. Maya watched them with the same gentle acceptance she brought to everything, occasionally offering suggestions but never corrections. "There's no wrong way to be a storm," she told one frustrated boy who couldn't get the spinning right. "Your storm might be different from mine." He tried again, this time forgetting about the spin and instead showing how his storm felt. Sharp, angular movements that looked nothing like Maya's flowing interpretation, but were perfect in their own way. "Yes!" Maya exclaimed. "That's your storm!" Watching her teach, I realized she had found her calling not as a performer, but as someone who helped others find their own authentic expression. She was 8 years old and already changing lives, not through grand gestures, but through quiet permission. The permission to be different, to be authentic, to dance your own dance in a world that wanted everyone to dance the same. The family group chat, usually filled with achievement updates and subtle comparisons, had a different tone after the reunion. Arya posted videos of herself trying storm dancing. Marcus shared an article about the importance of creative expression in child development. Even Patricia contributed, sending a link about alternative forms of intelligence and talent. But the biggest change came from my mother. She called one evening, not with her usual list of concerns about my life choices, but with a question. "I've been thinking about Maya's dance," she said, "about what it means to perform your truth instead of performing for approval. I realize I've spent my whole life doing the latter." It was the most vulnerable thing I'd ever heard her say. "It's never too late to change the dance," I offered. "No," she agreed quietly. "I suppose it's not." 3 weeks after the reunion, I received an unexpected call from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Valentina Reyes, a renowned creative director who had gone to college with Delilah. Apparently, my sister had shared Maya's dance video, and it had made its way through several hands before landing on Valentina's screen during a particularly frustrating production meeting. "I need to meet her," Valentina said without preamble. "Not for anything commercial. I'm working on a project about authentic expression in children, and that video. It's exactly what we've been searching for but couldn't articulate." I was immediately protective. "Maya doesn't perform for cameras. She's not interested in that world." "Neither am I," Valentina replied. "I'm interested in the world she created in that garden. I'm interested in how an 8-year-old understands something most adults spend their lives missing." We met at a quiet cafe downtown, Maya clutching her notebook, me ready to leave at the first sign of exploitation. But Valentina surprised us both. She didn't talk about opportunities or exposure. Instead, she asked Maya about her stories, about how she saw movement in everyday things, about what the world looked like through her eyes. "I watch clouds," Maya told her seriously. "They dance all the time, but people don't notice because they're looking at their phones." Valentina leaned forward. "What else dances that people don't see?" "Shadows, leaves, the way light moves through water. My mom's hands when she's painting." Maya glanced at me. She doesn't know they dance, but they do. That afternoon changed something. Not in Maya, she remained steadfastly herself, but in how others began to see the world she inhabited. Valentina's project evolved into something unexpected. A documentary about children who saw beauty where others saw ordinary life. Maya became one of several young voices, but her perspective on movement and expression wove through the narrative like a gentle thread. The filming happened at our home, in our garden, in the places where Maya felt most herself. They captured her morning ritual of watching dust motes dance in sunbeams, her afternoon conversations with the old oak tree in our backyard, her evening practice of catching moonlight in mason jars. She'd dance with the jars, creating patterns of light on the walls. "Why do you dance with light?" the filmmaker asked her one evening. Maya considered this seriously. "Because light wants to dance but doesn't have a body, so I lend it mine." The documentary crew spent a week with us, but it never felt invasive. They understood Maya's rhythms, her need for quiet spaces, her way of processing the world. They filmed her teaching Storm dancing to a group of children at the community center, captured her creating a rain dance during an actual thunderstorm from the safety of our covered porch, and recorded her explaining to a group of skeptical boys that flowers have their own form of hip-hop. But the most powerful moment came unexpectedly. My mother had agreed to be interviewed about creativity in the family, expecting to talk about Delilah's design success or Marcus's medical innovations. Instead, the interviewer asked her about Maya. "Your granddaughter seems to see the world differently. How has that challenged your own perceptions?" I watched from behind the camera as my mother's composed facade cracked slightly. "I spent so many years believing there was one path to success," she said slowly. "Good grades, good college, good career. I pushed all my children toward that path. When Sophia chose differently, I saw it as failure. When Maya came along, dancing to her own rhythm, literally and figuratively, I initially saw it as concerning. And now?" My mother was quiet for a long moment. "Now I wonder how much beauty I've missed by looking for it in only one direction. Maya doesn't see different things than the rest of us. She sees the same things differently. That's a gift I'm only beginning to understand." The documentary aired 6 months later on a streaming platform dedicated to educational content. We watched it together, Maya, me, and surprisingly much of my extended family who gathered at my mother's house for the viewing. Maya sat between me and my mother, occasionally hiding her face during parts where she appeared on screen. "Do I really sound like that?" she whispered during a segment where she explained cloud choreography to other children. "You sound like yourself," I assured her. The film wasn't just about Maya, or even just about children. It was about perspective, about the courage to see beauty in unconventional places, about the adults who learned to protect rather than correct that vision. There were segments about a boy who composed symphonies from city sounds, a girl who painted with mud and rain, twins who communicated through synchronized movements they called body language. But Maya's segments had a particular quality, a quiet certainty that moved viewers. The comments online ranged from parents reconsidering how they viewed their own children's quirks to artists finding validation for their unconventional approaches. More importantly, the film sparked conversations within our own family. Arya started taking contemporary dance classes that emphasized expression over technique. Marcus began incorporating creative therapies into his pediatric practice. Even Jasper, who had been so dismissive at the reunion, called to tell me his daughter had started weather dancing in their backyard, and instead of stopping her, he had joined in. She told me Uncle Maya taught her that puddles are just mirrors for sky dancing, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I didn't correct her about the uncle part. It seemed less important than the dancing. The ripple effects continued. Maya's school invited her to lead a workshop for teachers about incorporating movement into traditional subjects. She taught them how to use dance to understand math concepts, turns for angles, jumps for addition, how to embody historical events through movement, how to let science concepts live in their bodies rather than just their minds. Children learn through their whole selves, she explained to a room of skeptical educators, most of whom were 3 times her height and 10 times her age. But we keep making them sit still and learn only with their brains. That's like trying to paint with only one color. By the end of the workshop, she had middle-aged teachers rolling on the floor being tectonic plates, jumping to demonstrate chemical reactions, and swaying to show the movement of historical migrations. The principal later told me it was the most effective professional development they'd ever had. But with visibility came challenges. Not everyone understood or appreciated Maya's approach. Some parents complained that their children were coming home talking about dancing math problems instead of solving them properly. Some dance teachers were offended by her rejection of traditional technique. Online comments could be cruel, suggesting she was just an indulged child whose mother was enabling delusion rather than talent. I struggled with whether to shield her from these reactions or let her face them. Maya, as usual, found her own way through. "They're scared," she told me one evening after overhearing me on the phone with a particularly aggressive critic. "People get scared when you show them there's more than one way to be right." "Doesn't it hurt your feelings when they say mean things?" She thought about this, organizing her stuffed animals on her bed in what she called their comfort formation. "Sometimes. But then I remember that flowers don't stop blooming just because someone prefers roses to dandelions. They bloom anyway." The real test came when we were invited to a traditional dance competition. Not to compete, but to perform. An exhibition. The organizer had seen the documentary and thought Maya's approach might inspire the competitive dancers. I was skeptical, knowing how rigid that world could be, but Maya was curious. "I want to see how they dance when they're trying to win," she said. "Maybe I can show them how to dance when they're trying to be." The competition was everything I remembered from my brief attempt at putting Maya in traditional dance classes years earlier. Harsh lights, numbered performers, judges, with scorecards, and an atmosphere thick with hairspray and anxiety. Children who should have been playing were instead focused on perfection, their smiles painted on, their movements mechanically precise. We watched several routines from the wings. Maya's face was thoughtful, not critical, but puzzled. "They're all dancing the same dance," she whispered, "just in different costumes." When it was time for her exhibition, I walked her to the stage entrance. She wore simple clothes, flowing pants and a soft shirt that moved with her. No sequins, no stage makeup, no forced smile. The announcer introduced her as a special guest performer and mentioned the documentary, though most of the audience seemed unfamiliar with it. The music began, not her usual storm piece, but something new she'd been working on called Conversation with Silence. For the first 30 seconds, she didn't move at all. She just stood there, listening to something. Only she could hear. The audience shifted restlessly. Someone coughed. A judge looked at her paper, probably wondering if there was a technical malfunction. Then Maya began to move, but so subtly it was almost imperceptible. A finger lifted, a shoulder rolled, her head tilted as if hearing distant music. Gradually, the movements grew larger, more visible, but they maintained that quality of listening, of responding to something beyond the obvious music playing through the speakers. She moved through the space like she was discovering it for the first time. She touched the air as if it were solid, pushed against invisible walls, climbed stairs that existed only in her imagination. The competition dancers watched from the wings, their confusion evident. This wasn't dance as they knew it. There were no tricks, no techniques they could identify and score. But something was happening in the audience. The restlessness settled. People leaned forward. A small child in the front row stood up and began mirroring Maya's movements, not perfectly, but with the same quality of exploration. Her mother started to pull her down, then stopped, caught by something in her daughter's face. Maya noticed the child and smiled. Not a stage smile, but real recognition. She modified her movements slightly, creating a silent duet across the space between stage and audience. Other children began to move in their seats, small gestures that echoed what they were seeing. Even some adults found themselves swaying, drawn into this wordless conversation. When the music ended, Maya didn't strike a final pose. She simply stopped moving and stood quietly, as if the dance were still continuing somewhere inside her. The silence lasted several beats. Then the child in the front row started clapping, followed by scattered applause that grew steadier but never reached the thunderous levels typical of competition performances. As we were leaving, a woman approached us. Her daughter, one of the competition dancers, stood beside her in full costume and makeup, trophy in hand but tears in her eyes. "She wants to quit," the mother said, gesturing to her daughter. She's been winning competitions for 3 years, but after watching your daughter? She says she doesn't remember why she started dancing in the first place. I knelt down to the girl's level. What do you remember? I used to dance in my bedroom, she whispered, to whatever music I felt like. Mom says I used to make up stories with my dancing. You still can, Maya said, appearing beside me. Trophies don't stop you from telling stories. You just have to remember that the story is more important than the score. The girl looked at her trophy, then at Maya. Will you teach me to dance like you? Maya shook her head. I can't teach you to dance like me, but I can teach you to dance like you. That interaction led to an unexpected development. Several competition dancers and their parents reached out, asking if Maya would conduct workshops. Not to replace their technical training, but to supplement it with what they called soul dancing, or story movement. We agreed to monthly sessions in our community center, open to anyone but especially aimed at young dancers who felt trapped between perfection and expression. The workshops became a sanctuary. Competition dancers would arrive in their practice clothes, hair still in tight buns, bodies held in careful alignment. By the end of each session, they were rolling on the floor, hair loose, laughing as they discovered their own movement languages. Maya never criticized their technique. She simply offered alternatives. You know how to turn perfectly, she told one girl who could execute flawless pirouettes. Now show me how happiness turns. How does sadness turn? How does a secret turn? The girl struggled at first, her body locked in muscle memory. Then something shifted. Her perfect pirouette became a wobbly, giggling spin that had nothing to do with technique and everything to do with joy. She fell over at the end, laughing harder than she had in months. That was terrible, she gasped. That was honest, Maya corrected. Terrible is when you do a perfect turn but feel nothing. What you just did was art. These workshops created their own ripple effects. Some dancers found ways to incorporate authentic expression into their competition routines. Others decided to pursue contemporary or experimental dance instead of traditional forms. A few gave up competitive dance entirely, choosing to dance only for themselves. One mother confronted me after her daughter announced she was quitting competitions. She was on track for a scholarship, she said angrily. Your daughter has filled her head with nonsense about dancing her feelings. Feelings don't win scholarships. No, I agreed. They don't. But they do create artists. What does your daughter want? The woman deflated slightly. She wants to choreograph. She's been creating these pieces. They're strange. Nothing like what judges want to see. But she says they're what's inside her. Maybe what's inside her is worth more than what judges want to see. 6 months later, that same daughter premiered her own work at a youth arts festival. It was raw, imperfect, and absolutely powerful. Her mother sat in the audience crying, not from disappointment, but from recognition. She finally saw who her daughter really was beneath the costumes and scores. Maya watched these transformations with quiet satisfaction. She never took credit, always insisting she was just showing people what was already there. But I saw the profound impact of her simple gift, the ability to give others permission to be themselves. The documentary continued to circulate, finding audiences in unexpected places. Art therapy programs used it as a teaching tool. Education conferences featured clips and presentations about alternative learning styles. Parent groups discussed its message about nurturing rather than molding children's unique gifts. But perhaps the most meaningful screening happened in our own living room, when my father finally watched it. He had avoided it for months, claiming he was too busy, but I knew he was uncomfortable with the attention Maya was receiving for something so far outside traditional achievement. He sat stiffly at first, arms crossed, expression neutral. But as he watched Maya explain how shadows have their own choreography, something in his face softened. When she demonstrated how flowers dance differently depending on their mood, he actually smiled. By the time she was teaching storm dancing to the other children, he was leaning forward, completely engaged. "I never understood her," he said when it ended. "I thought she was just different. Difficult, maybe. But she's not difficult at all, is she? We're the difficult ones, trying to make her fit into boxes she was never meant to occupy." "She's exactly who she's supposed to be," I said. "Yes," he agreed, and I almost missed it. The transformation in my family continued to evolve. Holiday gatherings became less about comparing achievements and more about sharing discoveries. Cousins performed their own interpretive dances. Adults attempted to see the world through Maya's lens, finding dance in everyday moments. Even my perfectionist sister Delilah started incorporating intuitive design into her work, crediting Maya with teaching her to feel spaces rather than just measure them. But the most profound change happened in my mother. She started taking dance classes, not traditional ones but expressive movement for seniors. She would call me after each class, excited as a child about discovering she could tell stories with her body. "I danced my first marriage today," she told me once. "All sharp angles and careful steps. Then I danced meeting your father. It was completely different, flowing and unpredictable. The teacher said I looked 20 years younger during the second dance." "That's what truth does," I said. "It makes us younger. Or maybe it just makes us real." Maya continued to grow and evolve, but her core never changed. She still danced with shadows, still taught storms to anyone willing to learn, still saw music in silence and stories in stillness. The world around her had shifted to make more room for her kind of beauty, but she remained focused on simply being herself. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, she said something that crystallized everything I'd learned from watching her journey. "You know what's funny, Mom? Everyone talks about how I changed things. But I didn't change anything. I just stayed the same while everything else changed around me." She was right. She hadn't adapted to the world's expectations or modified her vision to be more palatable. She had simply been herself so consistently, so authentically, that the world had adjusted its lens to see her more clearly. "That's the bravest thing anyone can do," I told her. "Stay themselves when everyone wants them to be different." "It's not brave," she disagreed, sprinkling cheese on our homemade pizza with the concentration of an artist. "It's just easier than pretending. Pretending makes you tired. Being yourself gives you energy." I thought about all the years I'd spent pretending my marriage was happy, pretending I fit into my family's definition of success, pretending I was satisfied with the life I'd built to please others. Maya had never learned to pretend. Maybe that's why she could dance the way she did. She had nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to be except herself. The pizza went into the oven, and Maya started dancing to the timer's ticking, turning it into rhythm, into music only she could hear. I watched her, this child who had taught an entire family how to see beauty differently, and felt grateful for the lesson that had started with a storm dance in a garden. She caught me watching and held out her hand. "Dance with me?" "To the timer?" "To everything," she said. "There's music everywhere if you listen right." So I took her hand and danced in our kitchen, awkwardly at first, then with growing freedom. We danced to the timer, to the hum of the refrigerator, to the sound of rain beginning to fall outside. We danced to the rhythm of our own hearts, finally beating in time with who we really were. The morning of Maya's 9th birthday arrived with unexpected snow, late for April, but perfect for a child who had always danced to her own seasonal rhythm. She woke early, as she always did, but instead of her usual morning movement ritual, she sat by her window, watching snowflakes perform their slow-motion ballet to the ground. "They're birthday dancing for me," she announced when I brought her hot chocolate. "How can you tell?" "Because they're falling up sometimes. See? Regular snow only falls down." I looked closer and saw what she meant. The wind was catching certain flakes, lifting them skyward before releasing them again. To most people, it would just be snow in wind. To Maya, it was a celebration. We had planned a small party, but the weather had other ideas. Calls came in from relatives and friends, apologizing that they couldn't make the drive. Maya took each cancellation with the same serene acceptance, as if she'd known all along that this birthday would be different. Maybe the snow wanted a private party, she said after the 5th call. By noon, it was clear that our expected gathering of 20 had dwindled to just us and whoever could walk from nearby houses. But at 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. My mother stood on the porch, covered in snow, holding a covered dish. "I parked 3 blocks away," she said, breathless. "The roads are terrible, but I couldn't miss this." Behind her, emerging from the swirling, snow-like figures from a fairy tale, came others. Marcus had walked 2 miles from where his car got stuck. Delilah had convinced a neighbor with a 4-wheel drive to bring her. Mrs. Chen from down the street trudged through knee-deep drifts with her famous dumplings. Even Jasper arrived on cross-country skis he'd dug out of his garage. "We couldn't let a little snow stop us," he said, stamping his boots on our porch. "Not for Maya's birthday." But the biggest surprise came an hour later. A van pulled up, somehow navigating the unplowed streets. Out stepped Valentina Reyes, the documentary filmmaker, along with several children from the film. The boy who composed city symphonies, the mud painting girl, the synchronized twins. They had driven 4 hours through the storm. "We had to come," Valentina explained. "These kids have been talking about meeting Maya again for months. When we heard about the party, well, snow doesn't stop artists." Our small house filled with unexpected warmth. Children who had only met during filming reconnected like old friends, immediately beginning to create together. The symphony boy started making music with pots and spoons. The twins began a complex mirrored dance. The mud painter girl, unable to access her usual medium, discovered she could paint with melted snow mixed with food coloring. Maya moved among them like a gentle conductor, not directing, but connecting. She showed the symphony boy how her movements matched his rhythms. She joined the twins' dance, adding a third dimension that somehow made their synchronization more visible. She sat with the mud painter girl, and together they created temporary art on windows, watching their snow paintings melt and reform. "This is better than my regular party would have been," Maya whispered to me. "The snow chose the right people." My mother, who had spent years organizing perfect events with precise guest lists and formal activities, watched the chaos with wonder. Children were dancing in the living room, painting windows, creating music from kitchen implements. Adults were sitting on the floor, participating rather than supervising. Wet boots created puddles that became part of the twins' dance pattern. Food coloring from the snow paintings dripped onto the carpet, creating what the mud painter girl called accidental art. "I would have had a breakdown over this mess once," my mother said to me. "Now I see it's not mess at all, it's life happening." As the afternoon evolved, something magical emerged from the creative chaos. The children began collaborating on what they called a birthday story dance. Each child contributed their unique gift. The symphony boy created a soundscape using whatever he could find. The twins developed synchronized movements that others could follow. The mud painter girl designed simple costumes from scarves and sheets. Maya wove it all together with her gift for seeing connections others missed. They performed their creation as the sun set, turning our living room into a theater. The story they told was about snow that fell upward, carrying wishes to the sky. Each child played a different wish, for music, for color, for movement, for connection. Maya was the snow itself, lifting each wish, transforming it, returning it to earth changed. Watching them perform, I saw what Maya had built without trying. A community of young artists who understood that different gifts could harmonize, without competing. The symphony boy's rhythms supported the twins' movements. The mud painter's visual elements enhanced Maya's dance. Each child shone in their uniqueness while contributing to something larger. After the performance, as we served cake that had miraculously survived the chaos, Valentina pulled me aside. "I've been documenting artists for 20 years, she said. "I've never seen anything like what happens around Maya. She doesn't just dance, she gives others permission to be their fullest selves." "She learned early that there's room for everyone's gift," I replied, watching Maya help the younger children serve cake, making sure everyone got the piece they wanted. As the party wound down, the snow stopped falling. Parents began arriving to collect children, having to carry some who had danced themselves to exhaustion. Each child left with something, not party favors but intangible gifts. The symphony boy had discovered he could dance to his own compositions. The twins had learned to break their synchronization and find individual expression. The mud painter had realized she could paint with anything, not just her preferred medium. Maya stood at the door, saying goodbye to each friend. "Thank you for birthday dancing with me," she told them. "Now you know the secret. Every day can be a birthday if you dance it right." After everyone left, we surveyed the creative destruction. Paint-stained windows, a carpet decorated with food coloring, furniture pushed to walls, costume pieces everywhere. In past years, I would have seen disaster. Now I saw evidence of joy. "Should we clean up?" Maya asked, but she was already yawning. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tonight, we keep the magic." We made hot chocolate and sat among the beautiful chaos, talking about the day. Maya curled against me, suddenly looking every bit the 9-year-old she was. "Mom, do you think I'll always see dance and everything?" "I don't know, baby. Do you want to?" She considered this seriously. "I think so, but sometimes I wonder if other people get tired of me showing them. Like maybe they just want snow to be snow, not birthday dances." It was the first time I'd heard her express doubt about her gift. I chose my words carefully. "Some people might. But look what happened today. People drove through a blizzard, walked miles, even used skis to get here. Not for cake or games, but to be part of your way of seeing the world. Because they're my friends. Because you've shown them something they were hungry for without knowing it. You've taught them that ordinary things can be extraordinary if you look with the right eyes." She was quiet for a while, sipping her chocolate. Then she said, "Orchestra boy told me he used to hate his gift. People called him weird for hearing music in garbage trucks and construction sites. But after the documentary, he started meeting other kids like him. Like us. And how does he feel now?" "Happy. He says being weird is just another word for being interesting." "Smart boy." "Yeah, he's going to compose a birthday symphony for me. He said he'll use the sounds from today, the snow on windows, the dancing feet, even the sound of candles being blown out. He recorded everything." I smiled, imagining a symphony built from the sounds of joy. "That's a perfect birthday present." "Better than toys," Maya agreed. "Toys break, but a symphony made from your birthday? That lasts forever." That night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked me to leave her curtains open. "I want to watch the snow dance me to sleep," she said. I sat with her until her breathing deepened, watching the snow that had resumed falling. In the streetlights, glow. The flakes did seem to dance, swirling, lifting, creating patterns that existed for seconds before dissolving into new formations. Maya was right. Once you learned to see the dance in things, you couldn't unsee it. The weeks following, her birthday brought unexpected developments. The children from the party stayed in touch, creating an informal network of young artists. They shared videos of their work, collaborated on projects despite the distance, and planned monthly gatherings that rotated between their cities. Parents, initially skeptical of driving hours for play dates, soon realized these meetings were more than social gatherings. They were creative incubators where children pushed each other to new levels of expression. Orchestra Boy, whose real name was Elias, did complete his birthday symphony. He sent the audio file with a note. "I've never composed happiness before. Thank you for showing me what it sounds like." The piece was chaotic and beautiful, weaving together the laughter, the dancing footsteps, the whisper of snow against windows, and yes, the breath-extinguishing candles. Maya listened to it every night for a week, dancing a different interpretation each time. The mud painter girl, Rosie, began experimenting with ephemeral art, creations meant to exist briefly, then disappear. She sent Maya videos of paintings, made with breath on cold windows, designs drawn in sand at the beach as waves approached, patterns created with autumn leaves just before the wind scattered them. "You taught me that not everything needs to last to matter," her message read. The twins, Alex and Alexa, made the biggest change. They began performing separately as well as together, exploring how their individual styles differed when not locked. In synchronization. Their mother called me crying, not from sadness but relief. I've been so focused on their twinness that I forgot they were also individuals. Maya helped them remember. These children weren't the only ones affected by the ripple Maya had created. My mother had become something of a zealot for creative expression in seniors. She started a movement group at her community center called Dancing Through Decades, where older adults explored how their bodies held memories and could express experiences through movement. She would call me after each session with stories of breakthroughs. A man who hadn't spoken about his war experiences finding ways to dance his trauma. A woman with dementia who couldn't remember names but could perfectly recreate the dance she did at her wedding. "We're never too old to learn new languages," my mother told me. Maya taught me that movement is just another way of speaking. Marcus integrated creative movement into his pediatric practice more formally. He hired a dance therapist and created a program for children with various challenges: autism, ADHD, trauma, chronic illness. The results were remarkable. Children who struggled with traditional talk therapy found freedom in movement. Parents reported improvements not just in their children's conditions, but in their overall joy. "Medicine treats the body," Marcus told me during one of our coffee meetings. "But Maya's approach treats the spirit. We need both." Delilah's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. She began teaching design workshops that incorporated movement and intuitive creation. Instead of starting with measurements and color wheels, she had clients dance in spaces, feel the flow of rooms, express what they wanted their homes to communicate through movement before ever picking up a pencil. "I've won more awards in the past 6 months than in the previous 5 years, she admitted. Turns out when you design from feeling rather than just thinking, you create spaces that actually nurture people. Even Jasper, once the most traditional of us all, had changed. His daughter Aria had blossomed into a confident young dancer who combined technical skill with emotional expression. But more than that, Jasper himself had started moving. He joined his daughter in morning dance sessions, creating what they called conversation dances, where they communicated through movement instead of words. "We talk better this way," he told me. "When we use words, we get stuck in patterns. When we dance, we actually hear each other." The 1-year anniversary of the documentary's release approached, and Valentina proposed a reunion. Not a formal event, but a gathering of all the children featured, along with others who had been inspired by their stories. The location would be a retreat center in the mountains, a place where nature could join the dance. When we arrived, I was amazed by how the children had grown, not just physically, but artistically. Each had developed their gift in unique directions while maintaining the authenticity Maya had helped them discover. But it wasn't just the original children. Dozens of young artists had come, brought by parents who shared similar stories. After seeing the documentary, My child finally felt permission to be themselves. The weekend was structured loosely: morning movement sessions, afternoon collaborations, evening sharings. Maya didn't lead. She participated as an equal, learning from others as much as teaching. I watched her absorb Orchestra Boy's way of finding rhythm in silence, Rosie's technique for painting with breath, the twins' method of creating harmony through contrast. On the last night, without planning, all the children began creating together. It started with one child moving to internal music. Another joined, adding their own layer. Soon, the entire group was involved in a spontaneous performance that included dance, sound, visual art, and storytelling. Parents lined the walls, many crying, as they watched their children express themselves without fear or self-consciousness. Maya found me afterward, her face glowing with exhaustion and joy. "Did you see?" she asked. "Everyone was dancing their own dance, but it all fit together, like a puzzle where every piece is different but belongs." "I saw," I said, pulling her close. "It was beautiful." "Know what's more beautiful?" she asked. "This is just the beginning. All these kids are going to grow up and teach other kids, and those kids will teach more kids. Eventually, everyone will remember how to dance their truth." That night, I lay awake thinking about her words. She was right. This was just the beginning. Every child who learned to express their authentic self would impact others. Every parent who learned to see beauty in difference would raise children with broader perspectives. Every teacher who embraced alternative forms of intelligence would nurture gifts that might otherwise be hidden. The dance that started in our garden had become a movement, but not in any organized or institutional way. It spread like Maya's birthday snow, individual flakes falling upward, each unique but part of a larger pattern. There were no rules, no certifications, no formal structure. Just the simple principle Maya had always embodied: be yourself completely, and make space for others to do the same. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I thought about that first reunion, when Maya had stood up and spoken her truth. She'd silenced a room with her courage, changed minds with her authenticity. But that had been just the first note in a symphony she was still composing. A symphony where every person could contribute their unique sound. The next morning, driving home through mountains dusted with early snow, Maya was quiet. Finally, she said, "Mom, I think I understand something now." "What's that?" "Everyone's afraid of being different until they meet someone who shows them different is beautiful. Then they're afraid of being the same." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise," she said, matter-of-factly. "I just dance. But dancing teaches you things words can't." As we descended from the mountains, the snow gave way to rain. Maya watched the drops race down her window, her fingers moving as if conducting their paths. I knew she was seeing something I couldn't, some pattern or story or dance in the water's movement. But that was okay. She'd taught me that we all see different dances. The magic isn't in seeing the same thing, it's in sharing what we see with others. "Hey, Mom," she said as we neared home. "Yeah?" "Thanks for letting me be weird." I laughed, the sound filling our small car. "Thank you for teaching me that weird is wonderful." She grinned, then went back to conducting the raindrops. And I drove on, grateful for this child who had turned our family's narrow definition of success into a celebration of authentic expression. She hadn't just changed how they saw her, she'd changed how they saw themselves. And in doing so, she'd given us all permission to dance our own dances, weird and wonderful and absolutely perfect in their imperfection. If you had told me 10 years ago that my daughter would revolutionize our family's understanding of success and talent, I would have smiled politely and changed the subject. But Maya didn't revolutionize through force or argument. She simply existed so authentically that the rest of us had to expand our definitions to include her. And in that expansion, we found freedoms we didn't know we were missing. The story, that began with exclusion at a family reunion, had become a testament to the power of authentic expression. Maya hadn't just performed her way into acceptance. She'd danced her way into helping others find their own authentic selves. And that dance continues, spreading like ripples in a pond, touching lives in ways we're only beginning to understand. As we pulled into our driveway, the rain stopped. Sun broke through the clouds, creating a rainbow that arced perfectly over our house. Maya gasped with delight. "Look, Mom, the sky is dancing for us." And you know what? She was absolutely right. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.